an interesting proposal. Between worsening public finances and disappointing EV sales, governments are under pressure to weaken ambitious goals to decarbonize individual transport. EV subsidies seem to be expensive and ineffective. Sylvain, you propose an alternative strategy to achieve decarbonization goals at a much lower cost. Tell us more about it.
Yes, thank you, Markus. So, for context, emissions from transport have been the most difficult to abate. The rest of the economy is decarbonizing at roughly 1% a year, but emissions from transport have been very stable. So, we know that this is difficult. The proposal is in 3 steps that can largely be taken at the individual level, and it's keep, cut, and commit. Briefly, so keep corresponds to the observation that if you are a low mileage driver, right, of a combustion engine car, you are the best possible owner of that car. So just keep it, okay? Instead, we ask that you put your efforts somewhere else. This takes it to cut. Try and cut your fuel consumption by 10% now. And it's something that, ideally everybody would do. It's something that everybody can do in principle. There are multiple ways to do it. You can do it by cutting the number of trips that you take, but you can also do it by just driving in a more fuel efficient way, something we have evidence on. Right? And the reason this is useful is, well, first, it's going to save you money, but it also has a big impact in the medium run because it's something that we can do now at scale. The last step is to commit. Commit that your next car will be an EV. And this is really useful and important for industry because it de-risks and helps coordinate large investments that need to happen for the electric transition to be successful.
Thanks, Sylvain. So what are actually the key facts about today's car market we need to understand first to understand, the big benefits of your proposal?
Yeah, so there are 3 main ones. The first one is that the automobile industry is going through what's called an uncertainty shock. There is a lot of uncertainty right now about what's the future of automobile, whether it's about technology, batteries, and so on, whether it's about policy, whether the regulations will stay, what's going to happen to subsidies, and finally, economic uncertainty about whether it's car manufacturers or whether it is infrastructure operators, are they going to make the big investments needed to support, an electric vehicle world, okay? And so the impact of that uncertainty is that right now, people who are potentially on the market for a new car, they're going to delay their investment. Instead of buying their car now, they're going to keep their existing combustion engine car a little bit longer, watch how the technology evolves, watch how the regulation evolves, and then make a bit better decision for them, right? They're going to see how the future unfolds and buy what serves them best. The result of this is that people are reducing demand, and that's what's reducing overall new sales. It's not just, new sales for EVs, it's new sales for traditional combustion engine cars as well. But you can only do this for so long, right? People who need a new car, well, they can delay it a little bit, but at some point they're going to have to buy a new car. And so my leading hypothesis is that, we're currently building pent-up demand for new cars that's going to materialize in the next 5 years, right? So I'm expecting car sales to be higher in the next 5 years. This is in some sense good news, right? But that's a very stressful situation for car manufacturers and infrastructure operators. When you see EV sales go down, well, those operators are going to start thinking, should we make the investments or not, right? And so we still need to do something for them. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to coordinate their investments, right? Coordinating investments is tricky. And the worst response, in some sense, one of the places where this point of analysis is useful is that the worst response is to start panicking and start pushing for last-minute changes in direction, right? So we've seen some pressure along those lines to weaken some objectives. This is not good. This slows down the transition. This increases the uncertainty that consumers are facing, and it's going to further delay the demand for new cars, right? So instead, we need to reassure both the consumers that the plan is going to stick, and you need to reassure industry that future demand will materialize, even if it's a little bit lower in the short run. Okay? The second observation is that, completely renewing the car fleet is going to take decades. So in the French context, where I've done work, the car fleet consists of 40 million cars, and new car inflows is 5% of that number, right? So that already is a small number. It would take 20 years to completely renew the fleet. It's worse than that because electric vehicles are somewhat less than 20% of new sales. So we're roughly replacing 1% of the fleet every year. At this rate, in our estimations, by 2050, we'll still have tens of millions of combustion engine cars on the roads in France. And so good policies need to target the existing fleet as well. We need to make a difference, even if it's small, at the scale of the existing fleet. And that's why usage is so important. Okay? And the third observation is that there is what's called carbon leakage via the used car market. When I get rid of my combustion engine car and buy an electric vehicle instead, well, my car is not destroyed, right? It's sold to the dealership, which will then sell it to the used car market. It's going to be driven with, at least 80% chance, right? And then it's going to be driven by someone who's going to keep emitting. Of course, it's possible that you're helping someone buy your car and get rid of an even worse car that's going to get scrapped. But it turns out that when you try and quantify those magnitudes, this margin is a bit moderate. Right? So we estimate that at least 60% of a car's potential emissions are going to happen even if you switch to an EV, even if you decide to not drive a car anymore.
So the key three elements you mentioned are that there's a lot of uncertainty for the car manufacturer. It takes ages to replace the whole fleet, get this 1% rate of getting new electric vehicles going. And then you have the third element as well, that that if you sell your car, the second-hand user, they will actually then still drive your car, so you don't help the environment. What are the implications of your proposal?
Well, so the first implication is keep, right? This idea that if you're a low mileage driver and you switch to an EV, or even if you switch to walking everywhere, your car will turn out to emit more via the next person who drives it than via you, right? So you have a better impact. If you're a low mileage driver, you're the best possible owner of a combustion engine car. So you should keep your car. You're going to have a better impact on the environment by keeping your car and keeping its current usage, right? Because the used car market is big and active, it's going to cause a rematch between users and cars over a few years, so that the worst polluting cars will be allocated to people who don't drive them that much. And over the next 5 to 7 years, we estimate it's going to, it could reduce emissions somewhere between 3 to 7%. So it's a meaningful impact. That's the message for people who don't drive much. For the people who have an average annual mileage, the message is a little bit different. It's good if they switch, but the timing of their switch, whether it's now, whether it's in 3 years, whether it's in 5 years, it doesn't really matter so much for the environment. Okay? And so these people, we prefer that they put their effort elsewhere. And so that's the second part of the proposal. That's the cut. Okay? So we're not asking that everybody switch to EVs right now. If you don't drive that much, it's fine to keep your combustion engine car. Something that everybody can do right now is cut their fuel consumption by a little bit. We know the number we give is 10% because more than 60% of people in our surveys tell us that it's something they could manage easily. And there are many ways to do this. You could just drive less. You could cut the number of trips you take by 10%. But you could. One of the things that makes this something that's really doable by everybody is that you could just drive more efficiently. So steps like driving more smoothly, accelerating a little bit less, can really have a big impact on your consumption. The French Postal Service had a large-scale experiment with this, and on an ongoing basis, they're finding a persistent 5% reduction in their fuel consumption. So it's a really meaningful impact. It will save you money. It will reduce your emissions. And again, it's something that we can do right now and at the scale of the overall fleet. And that's why this, even though it seems like a small number, it's actually very powerful in reducing temperatures, by 2050, right? We estimate that it's at least as good as an accelerated electrification of the new sales.
So what's about the commit part of your proposal? How does this unlock EV adoption?
Yeah, so that's actually really important, right? Because in order for electrification to be successful, we really have to solve a coordination problem between large investors, large industrial investors, right? We need car manufacturers to create models that are affordable and that people like. We need infrastructure operators to invest in charging networks and generation capacity and so on, right? And in order for them to make these investments, they need to believe that there's going to be demand for EVs And at the same time, if they don't make those investments, then there is not going to be demand for EVs, right? So it's a chicken and egg problem. We need to do what's called coordinating expectations. We need to de-risk, in a sense, the hypothesis I was formulating earlier on, that there will be a large pent-up demand for EVs materializing in the next 5 years. Okay? And my proposal for this is what I call this green savings plan. And it takes the following form. You save between 100 and 200 euros or US dollars a month. And instead of being rewarded with just the market rate, you get the market rate plus an extra 3%. So it's a good investment, right? It looks like an attractive investment. In exchange, you commit to use those funds to buy an EV within the next 3 to 5 years, right? The reason this is valuable is that it's going to create a strong signal on this future demand. It de-risks the investments that need to be made, and that helps sure that even though consumers are delaying these investments, it's not derailing the electricity transition.
So who is paying for this extra 3% return you make on this 100 or 200 euros a month?
All right, so the main good news is that 3% on 200 euros a month for 3 years, it's actually not that a huge amount of money, right? It's roughly a tenth of the existing subsidies. And, you know, the reason it's cheap is that we're asking people for something much less painful than what subsidies are asking people for. We're asking people to let us know what they were planning to do. Whereas current subsidies, they're bribing people to do something they don't want to do, which is to buy a car now when they would rather wait and see. So something cheap that can live within the marketing budget of car manufacturers. Of course, government has a role to play in terms of kickstarting the program, you know, making sure that it's something that the industry as a whole picks up rather than individual car manufacturers.
All right, so the message is to keep your car if you don't drive much. Don't sell it to somebody who drives it more. Use the existing car less, which applies to everyone right now, and commit that you will buy a clean car down the road. And let's hope that people will take it up.
Yes, exactly. Keep, cut, commit. Thank you, Markus. By the way, I want to thank our research partners on this, the French Council of Economic Analysis, UFC Que Choisir, and BPI France. Thanks again.
Thanks, Sylvain. Talk to you soon.
Bye.